Halo Single Player Version 3, or as it's more commonly known among fans, Halo SPV3, is perhaps one of the most advanced and sophisticated mods for the original Halo Combat Evolved of all time. Designed from the ground up by Masters Elite and his stunning team, SPV3 doesn't just bend the rules, it breaks them. The original campaign consisted of 10 core missions, but the SPV3 mod takes it a step farther with a grand total of 17 missions that includes 2 versions of the Silent Cartographer and 2 brand new missions designed specifically for SPV3, one of which contains 2 versions in and of itself. There's also the epic but short Lemuria campaign that has been completely redesigned and injected with SPV3 assets. It's a grand total of 3 missions long, but since I've already covered Lemuria extensively on this channel, today we're going to focus on the core campaign of Halo SPV3. The good, the great, and the not so great. After all, no mod is perfect, right? Even one as incredible as this one. One thing that I need to point out here is that the revamped graphics alone are stunning. Stop and consider this. Halo SPV3 is running on a 20-year-old engine, yet it looks so good, even by today's standards. Alongside the graphical upgrades, you'll find assets from the other Halo games that have been successfully and seemingly injected into SPV3's campaign. Assets like the battle rifle. Oh, and there are a grand total of 3 variants of this weapon alone, by the way. You'll also find a satisfying form of the Covenant Carbine and the Focus Rifle. A plethora of new weapons have been added too. The Brutes, which have been successfully integrated into the campaign, have their own arsenal, which includes the classic Brute Shot, along with brand new weapons like the Shredder and the Piercer. Speaking of the Brutes, several other enemies have been added to the fray as well. This includes skirmishers from Halo Reach, Jackal Marksmen, ultra variants of both the Grunts and the Elites, and even Honor Guards. Even the Hunters have been fleshed out better with a grand total of 3 different variants that you'll encounter throughout the course of your playthrough of SPV3. Oh, and you can even wield the Hunter weapons this time around. And they'll be dropped off on the battlefield not by the classic spirits that you're all familiar with, but by menacing phantoms that seem to be a combination of those from both Halo 2 and Halo 3. 3.3 Guilty Spark's Sentinel Army has also received a sizable upgrade as well. In addition to the standard Sentinels, you'll also encounter Sentinel Majors that drop a much more devastatingly powerful weapon once they're destroyed, alongside with the colossal Sentinel Enforcers. Oh, and all the Sentinel weapons, including the Enforcer's Incineration Cannon, are wieldable by the player. As for the Flood, this may very well be the floodiest version of the Flood I've encountered in any Halo game. The carrier forms alone produce several more infection forms than anything we've ever seen before, and there are even multiple carrier types, some of which piggyback off of the combat forms. Brute combat forms along with Flood surface growth have also been added to spice things up when it comes to the most terrifying parasite in the known universe. Additional mechanics like vehicle hijacking have also been added. This will come in handy given that the Covenant Vehicle Sandbox alone has been greatly expanded to include not only the Spectre from Halo 2, but also a grand total of 3 variants of the Covenant Wraith that include the standard mortar version, a new take on the anti-air Wraith, and finally the green-colored fuel rod Wraith, all of which can be hijacked and piloted by the player. In fact, one of my favorite segments originates from one of the brand new missions of the game where all 3 forms of the Wraith appear at once. And because they balance each other out so well, it's near impossible to hijack one in order to take out the other 2. Speaking of new missions, let's talk about the major golden highlights of the game. A number of the missions have been reconstructed to include entirely new segments that not only extend each individual mission, but give the player an entirely new and unexpected experience altogether. For example, in the mission The Pillar of Autumn, you'll traverse the underbelly of the ship's tunnels and hangars. In the second mission, there have been 2 entirely new valleys added to the mix with lots of vehicular combat. Then there are the Evolved missions, one of which includes a completely rebuilt version of the Silent Cartographer from the ground up. Even seasoned veterans of the original game will be granted a brand new experience as you make your way in and around the massive island that has been infiltrated by the Covenant forces. There are also 2 brand new missions that have been added to the game's central campaign as well, one of which, like the Silent Cartographer, has an evolved variant, should you choose to go that route. The first mission takes place after the mission keys and is called None Left Behind. This is basically the second mission of the game in reverse that takes place after the Flood outbreak. Like with 2 Betrayals, you'll be caught in the middle of a multi-faction war between the Covenant, the Flood, and the Sentinels as you try to rescue as many of the surviving Marines as you can. The second brand new mission is called the Commander, in which you play from the perspective of a pre-armor stripped, gold-plated Arbiter while you battle against both the Flood and the Sentinels on the ruined island of the Silent Cartographer. You'll also get the privilege of using the Covenant Energy Sword, which has been a long-time dream of mine to use in Combat Evolved's campaign. It basically replaces the flashlight and acts like a piece of equipment. It only lasts for a short time before it needs to be recharged, but its devastatingly powerful melee attack makes the wait long worth your while. So with all that said, what are the drawbacks? It sounds like a pretty ironclad experience on paper, even as I'm constructing this review. Pretty graphics, tons of new weapons and vehicles, new mechanics and abilities, lots of new enemies, and even new experiences. And look at me dancing around the subject. Dancy, dancy, bouncy, bouncy. Okay, the mod still has some minor issues. For one, I still occasionally get the dreaded exception data message that crashes the game. The only thing that I can figure is that so much has been packed into this 20-year-old engine that at times, even my Alienware PC can't handle everything that's happening on screen. This seems to occur most often with the new mission, the Commander, but it's happened to me several times on other missions too. This can be particularly frustrating when you're trying to record footage for, you know, a review. Next up is enemy placement. The Hunters are introduced way too early in the game. The very first mission, in fact. Granted, your first couple of encounters with them are completely avoidable, but it definitely takes away from their initial introduction on the mission, the Truth and Reconciliation. You'll find them littered throughout the campaign, and after a while they become more of an inconvenience rather than a challenge. This applies to other enemies too, like introducing the Wraiths and Ghosts in the second mission of the game rather than later on. They become less menacing and more like, oh, it's you again type of encounters. There's also the fact that with the introduction of the Covenant marksman weapons, the core combat does seem to change quite a bit, especially when we're talking about elites and jackals with either carbines or focus rifles. Their range is extensive, and after a while, dealing with them can be flat out frustrating. On top of that, many of the encounters you'll have with the Phantoms will include jackal marksmen on both sides of the craft. Next comes the overall size of the missions. With all of the new segments, I've found that it can be very easy to get both confused and lost. Don't get me wrong, I love the concept of an open world Halo experience, but I also like being able to find my way from point A to point B without pulling out what's left of my hair. And this comes to my final point. The game would strongly benefit from having an easy mode just so that you can get through the story and enjoy all of the new things without constantly getting your ass handed to you. Yes, Halo SPV3 is hard, and this is coming from someone who has beaten a grand total of 5 Halo campaigns on Legendary with all skulls on, with no saves and no deaths. Even on normal setting, Halo SPV3 is Halo 2 Legendary tier difficult, and that's saying something. If you thought Halo 2 Jackal snipers were annoying, try dealing with Jackals armed with UNSC sniper rifles, or even the Flood for that matter. Also, oftentimes enemies are numerous and oversaturated. They are in a number of places where they don't need to be. Another example of this is the mission The Library. The Covenant have been added to it, and while this definitely mixes things up a little and adds several new dynamics to the mission, it also becomes increasingly annoying to suddenly encounter the Covenant when you've been spending the bulk of the mission prepping to fight the Flood. This is one of those scenarios where it really would have come in handy to have a bandana-like skull added to the campaign so I could utilize my favorite new weapons more often. Instead, with the vast arsenal that has been added to the sandbox, you'll find yourself trading out your weapons constantly from something that's suitable for something that's just okay. But at the end of the day, I realized that this wasn't put together by a massive AAA studio, but rather a very talented group of passionate Halo fans. It isn't perfect, but it's still beyond impressive, especially with the incorporation of their own set of game-modifying skulls, and even an extremely entertaining firefight mode, which I'll admit I've always wanted with the Combat Evolved sandbox. And, from what I understand, they will be expanding upon the firefight mode in the not-too-distant future, something I greatly look forward to experience. Now, I know that I usually close off these videos by giving the game a rating, but it's a tough call with Halo SPV3. Usually I rate my games based on price, but Halo SPV3 is 100% free to play as long as you have a working Halo PC access key. Is the game worth your time? If you're as big a Halo fan as I am, then the answer is a hard yes. There's tons of free play value and lots of new items of interest for even the most seasoned of Combat Evolved veterans. If you love Halo, especially as much as I do, you won't want to miss out on this. It's been in development for over a decade now, and the time, effort, and passion really does show. Download it for free today, and I'll provide a link in the description below. Let me know what your thoughts and opinions are on this amazing game, and I'd like to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for taking the time out of your busy day to sit down and watch this video. I really do hope that you enjoyed it, and if you did, I hope you'll consider subscribing for more great content right here on the channel. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have an absolutely wonderful week. I'll catch you all right back here next time, and as always, I'm the Tyrant, signing off.